Yeah, today I want to talk a little bit about sketching. I just posted a new article the other day. I'm really diving into it just as a concept, and I feel like it's not really something that's been talked about much, you know? But everybody has to do it. It's this kind of weird thing that it's like, we could ignore it and just hope everything goes well, or we could try to really think about how it works systematically and try to come up with something that's useful for everybody. So, yeah. Everybody have a good week? Yeah. I see a bunch of like nodding smiles. Feel free to talk. I mean, we can all chit chat a little. I guess I went snowboarding. I went snowboarding the last weekend, so it felt good to get away a little bit. I haven't been snowboarding in about 10 years, but it was good. It was like riding a bike. I thought it was gonna be, I thought I was gonna fall the first time getting off a lift. I was like, I can't remember how to do this, but I didn't fall and kind of set the stage for the rest of the day. It went really well. So yeah. Other than that, I've been sketching a lot. So lots of lots of sketching. I've been trying to fill up pages.
Yes, a lot of work, a lot of hard
A
work.
lot of hard work. I'm sketching on big paper, which I have something to say about that too. I realized as I was doing it. I've got my thoughts. I've got my thoughts on sketching. So, um, well, it looks like we've got oh yeah, Mike. It's good to have you back too. Sorry to cut your story off earlier, uh, but now we got
Yeah, no problem.
yeah. Everybody's here, so it'll be a lot more fun. So, I guess we'll just jump right into it. I don't know if anybody here has read my blog that I posted a few days ago, but I think it'll be an interesting read. It's the first of a couple posts I want to do on sketching. And I find sketching is this fuzzy thing that if we could really nail down some principles about it, I think could start to become a lot more useful for people. So I combed the UCLA library to see if there was anything. I've been online looking at dissertations, and there's just so little about it. I don't know. Has anybody here found any good resources on sketching that you have referred to or no? Okay. Sorry. So okay. Well, so what I what my article is effectively about, and let me go ahead and pull this off the site so I can refer to it, is I want to try to one dispel some myths, about people like Mozart, that they would compose in their head and then transcribe this, you know, this composition that's already complete, and it's just not true. And in fact, I found a small article on sketches by Mozart. They found in letters by Mozart that he sketched. And then I posted an image on the blog too, of a sketch by Mozart. And what's interesting about this sketch is so far it's unconnected to any known piece that Mozart wrote, which means that he was working out ideas just like everybody else. He was, and it's just as sloppy and messy as everyone else sketches. Um, so, so yeah, what I try to lay out in the article are some principles that I think everybody, if you get your head wrapped around, will make the sketching process a little bit more fun, a little more comfortable. And along with that, and I'm going to post one today, are experiments that I'm doing for myself. And what I recommend is that everybody else do these kinds of experiments too and see what works best for you, because I don't want to say that there's one way to sketch and it's going to work better for, it's going to be the best way for everyone. Obviously, everybody's got different working methods. In particular, some people like to write on the computer more than by hand. I'm a big fan of writing by hand. I think there's something different that happens. It embeds the information in your subconscious in a deeper way than just writing on the computer and typing on things. And there have been studies about handwriting, not notation, not music notation, but letters, and the way that it interacts with the brain, and something about that kind of hand-eye brain coordination that happens. I think there's something special that goes on there. But every person's got their thing. So the first principle that I identified is trusting yourself, and it sounds kind of silly, but what I find is what eats up a lot of time is details when you're sketching. And often you don't need to put in certain details. There are certain details that you do need to put in, and it usually has to do with, unique harmonies or specifically with melody. But often with chord progressions, with accompaniment, as soon as you get one bar down, and I find specifically with accompaniment, you can just start to continue on and just write chord, names, just write Roman numerals. And where the trust comes in is you have to trust that you're going to know what you meant and know what to do with it. So this, you're trusting your abilities, you're trusting your memory, you're trusting that you're going to be able to fill in the details. So that's kind of the first principle. The next one is setting limitations. I'm a big fan of limitations. And you can set them in numerous ways, and that's part of my experiments. I did one experiment that ended up being very difficult to maintain, but I was telling myself I'm going to finish one bar every 30 seconds. So in the past, I've tried saying, like, I'm going to set 30 minutes. I'm just going to compose for 30 minutes straight. And that's good, but I don't want to necessarily limit myself in that way. So I was like, I still want to make that forward progress. And I believe setting that kind of limit, every 30 seconds, and I ended up changing it to every 1 minute because it's hard to write one measure in 30 seconds. And it gives you a lot of perspective on what actually is taking place when you compose, and how much time you go back and forth not doing, getting down to business and actually writing stuff on the page and making forward progress. But when I did set that limit, and I'm trying to see which one that was. I think it was this big page, and it was like this first line here. I made a lot of progress, and I know this is going to be kind of messy seeing it, but I really did make a lot of progress while I was going. So I would say that one was a success, but you have to set it within your ability. So 30 seconds was difficult for me. 1 minute was a little bit difficult. But I would say like a minute 30 is probably good for the average person. Maybe 2 minutes. 2 minutes per bar. It seems like so long, but it goes by so fast. Especially when you've got your little countdown timer right in front of your face. You're like, oh my gosh, I just got to start writing notes. And occasionally that happened. I would just start writing things just to get to the end of the bar. So it's just an interesting thing. Daryl asked what manuscript. I like the Archives brand. If you go on Amazon, you can find Archives, and they've got quite a few different sizes. I have a couple of these just letter size laying around the house. I usually keep one here, one at the piano, and I think I've got a third one.
Yeah, Amazon's really good too.
Yeah, Amazon is a good place to get sheet music. So
yeah. Plus, there's Sheet Music Plus, there's eBay, and so forth. No.
And what I would recommend is it's cheap, right? Just, you're going to spend $10, but what you don't want is you don't want to be afraid to turn the page, start from scratch. You don't want to be afraid to use up paper. That's why I have like 4 or 5 books of sheet music. And in particular, another experiment that I did was I realized this. Writing on big paper makes you think bigger. At least that's my idea. And I looked at the composers that I look up to, right? Somebody like Gustav Mahler. He sketched on orchestral-sized paper, even though he was only writing 4-line sketches. I think there's something that happened subconsciously. I was primed, and this was kind of a longer sketching session. This probably was about 2.5 to 3 hours of writing music. I did this yesterday. And
for me, I also have this too as well. I have a manuscript paper from Kansas Stand over in Georgia. It's like 8.5 over 11. That's 12 stage.
Yeah, and 8.5. Well, what's interesting is I tend to write pianistically when I'm on 8.5 by 11 paper because it looks like a part. It looks like a piano part. This looks like a score. This is really big, right? It's a little bit unwieldy sometimes. But I started thinking in score, and the last thing that I sketched was actually this little orchestral texture idea.
Yeah, I see that.
I think it was something about it, and this is I think. Oh, you know what? If somebody's got me on speakers, if you don't mind muting yourself, I'm not sure who it is. I'm just gonna. Oh, there we go. It's gone. Um, there's just something about how you prime your subconscious, and I think that goes into a lot of this sketching. What are the things that you're thinking about beforehand, right? That what we talked about last time, the pre-composition process. What are you doing beforehand to get yourself into the mindset that you want to be? And it's everything goes into it. It's the paper size. It's art. What are you using to write? I happen to be using a red lightsaber, so I was actually using the dark side to compose yesterday, and um, maybe it worked. I don't know. Maybe I should be using the Force instead of the dark side. I guess it's all part of the Force, right? But no, I'm being silly. But writing on a real piano versus writing with samples, it all leads to different things. Um, so I see Thomas asked, "How do you know you didn't steal a melody?" Well, technically, I don't know I didn't steal a melody. Now, there's the kind of the easiest test is to grab somebody that knows a little bit about music and just start playing. Be like, does that sound familiar? Did I rip that off somebody? And then most of the time, if they've heard it, they'll be like, oh yeah, that kind of sounds like this. Um, but that's not the end of it. I mean, a lot of times, what you write down for your melody at the beginning doesn't need to be your melody at the end, and you can play around with ideas. And if you find that you did come up with something that is stealing a little bit, figure out a way to make it your own. To take that same example, yeah, if you do that, it's going to be the same. But whatever. I mean, that wasn't very good. I'm sorry, but yeah, copy, transform. Really take your ideas and mess around with them until you get something new that you like, or throw it away and start from scratch. Emma's asking how big are the staves on the paper. This orchestral one is actually a little bit small compared to the 8.5 by 11 because they're fitting on more. I think this is 2, 4, 6, 8, 12, 14, 16, 18 stave. So this is pretty big. I think they've got a smaller one. Yeah, 18 stave. But you know what? It's still big enough to write on, and you just have to be a little bit smaller with the way you write. But that's fine. I mean, that's like I said. It all goes into priming your brain about how you're actually what you're thinking about. I don't know what you're subconsciously thinking about. I didn't set out to write an orchestral texture yesterday morning, and that's why I found it so interesting. Is that I set out to just write more, 2-line melodic with some, very thin harmonic ideas underneath. And about 2 hours into it, I think I was making a cup of coffee, and I just started thinking like, oh, that's kind of an interesting idea in my brain about this texture. So, and Charles is asking, when sketching on paper, is it harder since you can't hear the immediate note feedback like you can with software? In a way, yes, it's harder. It takes, I think, more discipline because you don't get that immediate gratification that the software gives you. But once again, you have to either audiate, right? You need to look at your page, and you need to hear it, or you need to play it in some way to get that feedback. And I think both of those are very valuable. And once again, they prime your subconscious to be thinking about your music. If this was an idea here that I sketched the other day, and I'll get into this in a second. I started with the ending, right? So I went, right? I was like that. I just told myself I'm going to start with something that feels very ending like. And it primed me. Like, as soon as I wrote that, I was like, I know how to start this thing, right? So I went, and I do have some harmony. that, right? And then I just kept on going from there. What was I going with this stuff? I can't remember what my point is with that. Either way, oh yeah, harder. So I had to play these ideas though over and over again, right? Right. I probably played that 30 times in my little sketching session where I wrote that. But every time you play it, it gets ingrained in you, not just hearing, but physically. It's in your hand. And if it's in your hand, it's in your muscles, it's in your brain. You're building synapses, right? If you put something on autoplay, right? If I were to just write this motive and put it in my DAW or put it in Sibelius and put it on repeat and have it loop over and over again, yeah, I'm hearing it, but I'm not learning it. It's not like you're learning a scale. You know, how do you learn a scale in the piano? You just practice it a bazillion times. It's really the only way around it. So something about all this stuff, playing it by hand, writing it by hand, it's just this feedback mechanism that it's, you know, if you think about all the great music that you listen to. And this is, I mean, obviously there's certain styles like EDM. If you love EDM, it's going to be written on a computer, probably not by hand, you know. But if you think about all the great classical romantic, which is really my focus, they wrote it by hand with a piano. They almost always, I could say, never used software. You know, obviously most of these guys were dead before computers were even invented. But even the people that have died in the 2010s that are great composers were still composing a lot by hand. And I think that says something. I think there's something special about it. So hold on, let me back up here. I've got a lot of questions to get back to. Yeah, Ilka's saying that he does get different results when composing by hand versus computer. I think everybody is going to get the same thing. You just can't avoid it. It's that when you write by hand, something different happens in your brain. Vasco asked if I have a degree. I do have a degree in history. So I do not have a music degree. And I did take 5 semesters of theory in college. So I went about a year and a half as a music major. And I played in the wind band, you know, in the marching band and the jazz band. And I did compose in college. But I was also in ROTC going into the Army, and I found that the two did not gel very well. And history only required 8 classes for the degree beyond the general ed requirements. And I was like, I like history, so I switched. You know, I don't know if it was good for me in the end. I think not being in music in college and then spending 10 years or about 10 years doing lots of other things besides music has informed the way I approach composing in a much different way. You know, I think I approach things more business-like than I do, you know, and more kind of practical than so much as an artist. You know, I don't know. I don't know what to say about it, I guess. But
Yeah, I was in the same level too, you know, because I also hold a diploma in business administrative technology from Chat Tech, as well as a certificate in Microsoft Office, and that helped pretty good. But even though I did play a bit here and there, but they didn't have a music program or anything like that.
yeah,
But you know,
yeah, you know,
I believe everyone's different.
everybody
You know,
is different.
depending on their style, their feel. You
Yeah,
know.
and I was talking about when we were having all the little technical kerfluffles at the beginning. I was talking with Mike earlier about trying to find a mentor. You know, I know a lot of people here in LA that are really good composers, but I just haven't found one that I've fully gelled with yet, and I would like to really pursue studying composition with. So I'm on the lookout for somebody I can study with. I applied to USC. I didn't get in, which may be a good thing. I don't know, it's $50,000 a year. Or no, it's $25,000 a year for the master's. So either way, it's a lot of money. So I don't know, it's probably good that I didn't get in. But so yeah, let me move on. There was another question here. Let's see. When starting to build your chops, it doesn't really matter if it's someone else's tune. What you find? Oh yeah, copying. So basically, the person named email account, and I don't know your real name, um, the basically copying. Yeah, I'm a big fan of copying out music. In fact, the 201 course, the sonata form course, is based around this concept of copying, emulating, assimilating, and ultimately taking that and doing your own thing with it. But if you look back at all the great composers, and in fact, I wrote an article about this as well on the blog, they all copied by hand. I think it was one of the Counterpoint articles. They all copied by hand other great composers, and it's the same thing. Imagine if you took a Mahler symphony, which it's hard to do a whole symphony, but here we go. This is the opening to Symphony Number 1, right? I took the entire score and I copied it out by hand, or the entire, first page or two. And it takes a long time, but you learn so much in that process of doing it. I don't know, this by hand stuff. There's something special about it. I'm sure in a few years there'll be more of these, CAT scan, MRI studies where they look at what happens. They're like, see, it makes extra connections. It's like, yeah, we could tell you that just by doing it. So, okay, hold on. I'm losing track of questions here. I may do a class on Sibelius or MuseScore in the future, but the thing is, those kind of classes they expire real quickly, and I don't know if it's worth it. There's a lot of good stuff out there. Half the battle is just memorizing the key shortcuts that you use all the time. So you know what? I'm gonna move on just a little bit about the principles here, and we can talk a little bit more about the nitty-gritty of sketching. So the next principle after setting limitations, and you can see the kinds of limitations you set there, is focusing on what's actually essential. So it's really easy to continue to write things that are, I don't know, not essential when you're sketching. And this comes back to the trusting yourself, leaving out accompaniment details. Often you can just do that because it's really easy to figure out after the fact if you generally know the kind of accompaniment that you want. If I write in the first measure, then I can just write block chords, or I can just write a single note, and then later on I can figure out the exact voicing that I want. If I don't want that, if I want, it's the general feel that I was feeling at the time. That's really what I get to, and that's more often than not, what I find is essential material is some kind of melody, and I think it actually works beneficially for us as a composer because it's the quickest thing to write. It's probably the most difficult thing to get right, but it's the fastest thing to write, WRITE, because it's one note at a time. You're not writing 10, you don't have to write out entire chords. So making your way melodically as much as possible. But occasionally, chords are the most important thing. So I don't know if you can see here, but underneath I left the melody blank and I just wrote some chords that I wanted to continue the line with, and told myself, you know what, at a later date, I can probably figure out what I want melodically at this moment. I've got an opening melodically. I just don't know what I want to do in this little section here. And I want to just bridge the gap, and I want to make forward progress. So often, forward progress is the focus here. And that leads into the next one, leave out redundant material. They really almost, I should maybe combine them into one single principle. But your goal is forward progress, which I actually think is principle 6. It's my last principle. But you want to make progress as much as possible, because once you get the notes on the page, it takes away this layer of anxiety, something, the blank page syndrome. Everybody's got it, writers, people writing books. But when you actually get stuff on paper and you generally know what you're thinking about, music-wise today, then it just feels good. Like you're like, oh, I've got this. I'm 100% confident I could turn this into a piano piece. 100% confident I could turn this into a short orchestral theme. And I am confident that this will probably make it into my symphony at some point. I like this theme right here. So that's a lot of confidence that one page has given me. And if you look, it's quite sparse. A lot of times there's no accompaniment, there's no chords, it's just melody. But there's enough info there to figure things out. And I think that's really what it is about sketching is you're figuring out the relationships of things. You're figuring out melodic ideas and fragments. and you're priming your subconscious, because when you sit down to flesh this out, um, you're ahead of the ball game. Whereas if you sit down, and this is my thing about DAWs, is you sit down with your DAW and you've got all your instruments loaded up, or your Sibelius, you got a full score. You haven't laid the groundwork for yourself to really take advantage of the power of that thing. Whereas if you've got the skeleton, the basics down here, then you can take advantage of what Sibelius offers you or what your DAW offers you. So, yeah, Henrique is saying typing on Sibelius is faster. There's no doubt that you can write more notes in notation software and on a DAW in a shorter amount of time than you can writing by hand. But can you write better notes? That's really what we're after. It's this balance between making that progress and making the right progress. And I find there's nothing better than writing by hand. So, I've got a principle of 5 here. Write the harder stuff first. I'm not quite sure about that one though. I threw it out there. That one may go. And then obviously principle 6, making progress. So that's what this article is about. I recommend reading it, letting me know your thoughts, and now we can kind of jump into sketching as the actual act of sketching, and not so much building the principles. I want to build my system of sketching around principles that we can all kind of agree on. I think that'll lead to a better system. Freddie said, so you let the chords there, and then you come back to it when you'll start with the chord tone. Yeah, basically, yeah. In a section where I decided I don't really know what the melody needs to be here, yeah, I'll just write some chord tones, especially when the harmony is the primary focus mentally for me at that moment. So I'll just play. In fact, I'll play what I wrote. So this is what's on the big sketch page, right? So I started with this little kind of open sound. Oh, and this is one thing too. Don't be afraid to write simple, right? Right, 151. There's absolutely nothing wrong with 151, and I want to reiterate that for a lot of people. I think a lot of times it's tempting to say I'm going to write to try to go as fancy and cool and hip as you can right at the beginning. But you know what? If you look at a lot of the great masterworks, they're usually a lot of 1, a lot of 5, and a lot of 2 in there. They don't try to wow you with their ability to harmonize something, because the moments that are really powerful in music, you can't have too many of those, right? So I've kind of deemed it the impact chord, if you will. It's these kind of things you think about. I use this a lot as an example, but the Indiana Jones theme. Right? That's just a 1 suspended chord. Right, we've barely left 1. And then here's the impact chord. Right? That's a flat 2 chord. It's got this kind of Phrygian sound, very cool. Let's see, what does he do? Right? And that's just basically it's a 5 with a 4/7 chord. Or I think he doesn't have an A in there, but so he's got that 1 impact chord that just sticks out. But if you have too much of that stuff, it can get tiresome. So that's why I say just don't be afraid to go 1-5-1 a little bit. Yeah, Angie asks, what if you begin your sketch with the emotional impact you want to make? You know what? That's perfect. That's awesome, because whatever you do, whatever you think about, however you prep your mind, it's going to lead to different kinds of results. So if I was, I started this sketching session with the idea that I wanted to make, thematic, melodic material, not thinking so much about the emotional impact as getting something down on paper. But if I was thinking I want to start with something that's emotionally impacting, Well, that could automatically lead to certain chord choices, you know. Right there. That's an idea. I just played that. It was one chord leading to, or that was a half diminished chord, right? Very emotional chord. And you may change it up, you know? However you want to do it. If you're looking for that emotional impact, then yeah, you're going to sketch in a slightly different way, and that's what's interesting about sketching. I was listening to this album of Barber piano music, which see if I can pull it up here, so you can hear. I just found this one piece. Let's see. Let me find it in my library real quick. Here we go. It's this album called Barber Souvenirs and Recollections, and it's what's interesting. It's Samuel Barber's music over his whole lifetime, but it's for piano. So you get to hear, you know, what was he doing when he was young and, you know, middle and older stages. But I found this piece just fascinating. Can you hear that? So that album, in fact, let me see if I can get a link to it. Let's see. Do they do a link here? Share album, copy link. Here, I'll post a link here to iTunes. It's called Souvenirs and Recollections, and that's from 3 essays version for piano is what it's called. It's not the same as his essays for orchestra. And I've been looking around for the music. I may email the pianist that played this, but it would be actually an interesting exercise, you know, to try to figure out what he's doing by ear, you know, whatever the chord is. Let's see. What's the next chord? Yeah, I think. So that's interesting. He's going from A to F, but because he's blending the two, it really sounds like one F major chord, but with a minor tint. It's an interesting concept with it. So yeah, there's benefit right there in transcribing stuff by ear, even if you don't write it out. Just taking a second to play it, figure it out on the piano is useful. That is track 12, by the way, on the album. So if you're gonna check it out, track 12. And I know for a fact it was on Spotify too, because I had listened to the album on Spotify a while ago. Okay. So yeah, let me play what I wrote yesterday. So. Here's one of these impact chords. You know, so this was the part here where I just started writing chords. So that was basically my little sketch theme there, and I knew kind of harmonically how I wanted to end it. I knew where my little impact chords were. What I found interesting about this is to me that actually sounds more like a consequent phrase or like a continuation kind of feel harmonically. So I had the idea of going back and creating a beginning to that a little bit more. Let's see. Something like that. I don't know. It's hard to sketch in front of people, especially with a big audience like this. For some reason your brain goes like, so. Yeah. So, and I had some other things on here. What's interesting about coming up with orchestral textures like I did down here is that you end up your mind is freed a little bit from the constraints of what your samples can do or really what real players are expecting. And I'm going to try to sketch more orchestral textures and come up with things on my own. But so yeah, I mean, do anybody else have questions or things you want to talk about, and especially in regards to sketching? And feel free to unmute yourself. Vasco's got a question, so go ahead. Hey.
Hi there. Can you
Yes,
can you
we
hear me?
can.
Hi. I wanted to ask something that I feel I'm not sure if it's kind of related to sketching because I usually when I sketch something because I can't hear the notes in my head when I write them down, I usually do it in an instrument, usually the electric guitar or sometimes the piano because I'm learning the piano now. But when I'm just like noodling ideas or just like trying to come up with something, I feel like I said above in the chat. This is probably a stupid question, but I'm going to bring it up anyway. I just feel like most of the time I always get stuck in the same way of developing my ideas. I just feel like it's questions and responses all the time. I don't know. I actually just uploaded a video on YouTube. If you want, I can show you like a perfect example of how my brain usually develops something. Because either it's on the piano or on the guitar. I don't know. I just feel like 99% of the time, every time I come up with something, it
It's just
just
question and
feels
answer.
like that, and it feels like.
Yeah. It's just the
Sorry?
question and answer kind of antecedent consequent.
Yeah, it's what I feel. It's
Yeah.
what I feel. I actually have a video
Well,
on YouTube. It's just like 1 minute of me playing the piano, something like
okay.
that.
Yeah. Let
If you
me.
want, I can forward the link.
You know what? You post the link here. I can't. Oh, you know what? Actually, there is a way for me to play a YouTube video here. Yeah, send me the link. Because I
Okay.
can.
Let me just figure out when it starts because there's some mistakes. Give me one
Okay,
second.
that's fine. So what?
Okay, I found it. Okay, it's around the 34-second mark or 33. I think you can hear it on the microphone
No.
already.
Just give me the link because I can. Oh yeah, there we go. Let's see.
Jump to the minute 23. Actually, remember, I'm learning how to play the piano, so there's bound to be
Okay,
some
here we go.
mistakes. And it's very simple. It's not particularly complicated. It's just like octaves in the
Yeah,
left
we'll
hand
listen.
and some
Yeah,
arpeggios
we'll
in the
just
right
listen
hand.
for a second.
Oh, I can't listen to you. I think somebody muted you.
Oh. Okay, thank you. Please don't mute me because I'm the boss here. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, I try to play everything from my computer. So if I get muted, a lot of times you can't hear what I'm playing. Oh, actually, it mutes me automatically when it's playing.
anything.
Yeah, we can't hear
Okay,
anything.
hold on. Let
Um,
me try one more time. Can you hear? Okay.
Yeah,
there
we
go.
can hear it.
I'm not so sure. I think we can hear you, but we can't hear the video. You want me to forward you the link, like via email or something, or like send you the file?
Let me see. Yeah, if you could send me the file, I could play it for everybody.
Just put your email address
Yeah.
in the sorry, in the chat room.
Let's see. Just
It's like a 5 mega video. It was made on my phone, so it will probably be
okay.
quick.
That's fine. Yeah, I just sent you my email address. What is the note you started on? Let's see. It's something like that, right?
Oh, that's way too complicated. But it sounds a little similar. I'll
Kind of
just forward
basically.
you this in
Yeah.
1 second. Oh, it's very rudimentary, I told
No,
you.
there's no worries. Yeah, I do want everybody to hear this because I think this will be an interesting thing to work through. So let me know when you've.
Yeah, I'm just following the email right now.
Let's see.
This shouldn't take too long.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, it's already on 30%. You should receive it in like 10 seconds
Okay.
probably. Then just keep to the 23-second mark because before that's just
Yeah.
mistakes. Yeah, it's there.
Okay. Give it a second here. My email to show up. Not there yet. So I don't want to dive too deep into it until everybody get a chance to actually listen to it. There we go. Okay. Almost got it. Everybody just hold on 1 second. And let's see. Okay. Can you hear it?
Yeah.
Here's the video. Okay, so or do you want me to finish it up here?
No, it's fine. It's just the same idea
Okay.
again.
I think I gotta.
It's in C minor. I think it starts on an F. It starts like the bass notes is an octave
Okay, I got it.
F.
Something like that, right?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
And then. So okay. So I would say first, the frustration I think you're feeling is one, it's.
I can't
Oh,
see.
okay, yeah, sorry.
I
Let
just
me
see the
stop
movie.
presenting everybody that video. Okay, here we go. So I think there's a couple things that are leading you to go in that direction. First, you are clearly sketching out harmony, right, and a texture. And the problem with sketching textures and making that the base for what you're doing is that it's so easy to just get stuck on that, right? So if you come up with I mean, you came up with this, so. Right? And that's a cool idea, right? You can do a lot. But all it is a texture. That's like the background. That's the padding, right? I feel like there needs to be more, right? Because you can do this all day. But you're not really making that much progress with it. You're just kind of repeating the same idea with a different chord, maybe. So I would say to get you out of that, if you feel like you're doing the same thing over again, is to sketch some completely different aspect of it. So if I'm trying to break down orchestration into these concepts that make it useful for people, right? And the way I break it down is primary element, secondary element, right? Which is usually like a counter melody, but it could be really anything that's secondary. Pad, harmonic support or harmonic pad, bass, and percussion, and melodic fills. So I need an extra finger here, or I could just do that. And that's what I see as these arrangement functions, right? These I'm trying to relate it in a way to formal functions, but these things that you add, so you could have a primary element by itself, right? It could be a melody. And if we were to take this idea and just say, okay, we've got this as the pad, right? And the harmonic support. And it's a texture that we can build our things off of. And you've already come up with a chord progression. Right? So you've got this idea. I would say now put that to the side. Once again, let that sit in your subconscious. You've already figured that out. Make whatever notes you have to make on a piece of paper. And it could be as simple as you write out the first measure of this, right? And you write F minor, and then after that you write E flat major, then C major, right? And that's all the notes that you need for that. You don't need to go beyond that. That's that trusting yourself and leaving out redundancy, right? And just getting the minimum down that you need to make progress. And then I would say focus on some other element that is being neglected. And I say at this point, it's the primary element. It's the melody. There's no melody there to really hold on to. Now, I know you've do more like trance, electronic type stuff. I think that's what you said last week. Oh, trip hop. That's it. Yeah, trip hop. That's fine. I mean, what it becomes in the end doesn't necessarily have to be what it is at the beginning. But I would say let's figure out a melody for it. Now you've already got chords, so you've got a big leg up. You could do a chord tone melody and then embellish it, or you could just start going with whatever. You could say, okay, I'm going to write those 4 bars. Now I'm going to just put a double bar line or whatever, and I'm just going to write something new in the same key. So it could be. Right? I just played that. I don't know what it was going to be before. I just was kind of noodling, right? But now, this is the secret, is you grab your pencil and your paper and you write that down. I don't care if you like it or hate it. You just write it. So you write it. We got F. And you try, if you can't figure out the rhythm at first, do relative spacing. So the F is a little bit further, or the G right here.
No, it was trip
It's a
hop.
little bit further away from the F than it is going to be from the next.
But this
one,
is
A
very
flat.
different. I feel
So,
this
and I'm
is.
not even worried about.
I don't know.
what the
This I don't.
actual
This
rhythm
doesn't
is.
feel like
I
trip
can
hop. It
figure
feels
out that
very
way,
different
but
to me.
I'm just trying to make it easy for people who are not used to transcribing from their head. Right, real simple. Right, and is this going to work over that progression that we've done? I don't know, but it could. So if we go, I'm going to have to do this a little bit lower here, or I think it was. Right, and now you said you repeated it the next time around. I think that's a solid idea that you could go with, and feel free to take it and steal it and do whatever. I give up copyright on that. It Yeah, and I didn't do anything special. I wasn't like planning out that G or the B flat was going to go to the E flat. I just started playing, and at the right moment, I just moved my hand. It just fell into place, right? But all I did was write it's just almost like a scale, right? Almost like a basic exercise for piano, right? I could see that being in a Hannon book or something. And a lot of times that's all you need. But now you've got somewhere to go with it, right? So you could repeat the idea. Right? And now that obviously you feel like you've taken yourself into a hole here, right? You feel like you've composed yourself into the corner. You're on a 5 chord, right? So let's ask, what would Beethoven do? And I know exactly what he would do. He would go there.
It actually,
right?
it actually
How do
suited
I know
very well
Beethoven would do that? Because that's
the
exactly what
harmony.
Beethoven does in Piano Sonata Number 1, Movement Number 1. He gets to the end. Right, there we are. We're on that 5 chord.
Yeah.
Sorry. You get the point, though. You're not. You don't compose yourself into a corner often, even though you think you do. I love the opening line to Vincent Persichetti's book on 20th century harmony. Any chord can follow any other chord, right? You can make it work. Now, obviously, we learn a lot about how functional harmony works and voice leading and all these things, but you can make anything work, right? So if we get to this point here, let's see. Right, so we're on a C chord here. Where's somewhere weird we could go? Give me a chord. Just think of something that doesn't work. What won't work here? A diminished 6. Wait. So, but what chord? Give me like an actual chord, like F. A diminished, right?
Yeah, I do.
Right? You can make anything work with kind of the force of willpower at that point. So, and this is why I say don't get yourself composed into a corner, or don't think that you've composed yourself into a corner. The natural way to do this is to try to do smooth voice leading. So you can always take a chord to its little, parallel minor, right? You can find a chord that works with smooth voice leading. Right? There I went to E major, right? It's a chromatic meter. Or
we're in C minor, right?
Right. And let me say one thing too.
Okay.
It's much easier to do this at kind of natural
I diminished
breakpoints in the form. So
6.
if we get to
6.
Right, we're at kind of at a natural break.
Okay, so we're in C. A diminished A diminished.
So there's just so many possibilities where you can go, but I would say the problem is you're not getting past what you've already sketched. You've already done the hard work here, coming up with the texture, right? You kind of know the feel already. You know the progression, right? You know that side of things, but what you don't know melodically, where are things going? And that's where I think you really need to focus. Yeah, so then what's the answer for that? What would you guess is your answer for that? No, don't worry about disappointing. I mean, so this is what I would do. If you've written something really good and really catchy, right? Circle it, and then next to that, right, put a double bar line, change the key signature, change the time signature, change the tempo, change the accompaniment, make it feel 100% different. Do whatever you can do. If you got an earworm, right? If now for the next 3 days you're going right, you can't get that out of your head, then it's time to leave F minor alone. It's time to leave that alone, and now pick something. Let's do A major.
Yeah, it was a great help actually. Just an additional point. Usually when I sketch something that's very
Right. It's much
motivic
easier to get
and
out
very
of the
easy to
mindset of
remember
what
or
you're
catchy,
doing
I
than you
think that's
think it
even
is.
worse.
But
Because it just gets
chances
stuck
are,
into your
by the
head. It's so
time
bad.
once you get it in your head, right? If this is what's in your head, my guess is that every time you sit down at the piano, that's the first thing you do.
I feel this is a very tricky question based on what you told me just now. I don't want to
Right?
disappoint what
So
you
just don't do
what
that.
you just
Do something out of left field. Right? Throw down some random notes. Create a 12-tone row and try to harmonize it with functional harmony. Do whatever you need to do to get yourself out of that mindset. But a lot of it is that you're the one actually forcing yourself down that road again, and you're not throwing out your baby, so to speak, which is the Stephen King term, which I think we talked about last time. It was a little bit creepy, but you got to be willing to say, okay, that's a great idea, and I'm just not going to worry about it. I'm gonna forget about it, because if it really is a powerful idea, it'll come back in a couple days, or you'll notice it again. You'll say, hey, that's actually a good thing, and you'll know kind of where to develop it for, or what to develop it for, and where it needs to go. And that's why I say the sketching process. I was reading a book about the process of studying sketches, right? So this is called A Handbook to 20th Century Musical Sketches. And it's really for musicologists who are going to study the sketches of composers. While reading this, I found out that Stravinsky actually saved and published his sketches for the Rite of Spring. I'm trying to find a copy, but it's missing from UCLA. But one of the interesting things they said about Stravinsky is that he would often come up with an orchestration while he was sketching, and then it would frequently change later on. He would also frequently have little boxes in his sketches for the next movement. So if he was writing this one thing, then you would find a little section that would be for the next movement in the same, another part of the Rite of Spring. And it would come while he was writing the first part. So you can't, sketching is not a linear process. It's really more, it's fuzzy. Everything's very fuzzy when it comes to sketching. So let's see. Yeah, Persichetti's statement really frees up my thinking. Are you familiar with Ernst Tuch's The Shaping Forces of Music? I did read through that a long time ago, but I don't think I found it all that useful for me. You'll see he has an astounding example making a major seventh move to a major chord, and then major chord sounds dissonant, and the major seventh sounds harmonic or harmonious because of the movement of the voices. Yeah, it dissonance is one of these things that it's very situation dependent. So a chord, an A major chord sounds very consonant until you add an A flat major chord underneath it. So it's one of these weird things that you can cause dissonance without knowing it, or you can cause, consonance in weird ways. So yeah, it's something I do like to think about a lot. So other questions? Yeah, I think that was a good one. Let's see. Damien wrote here. Can you explain what you mean by texture, please? I have never heard that word used before. Yeah. So when I'm talking about texture, and this is one of the things I want to start to clear up in the next couple months while I'm creating my orchestration course, is terminology is very fuzzy when it comes to orchestration as well. But generally, the way I think of texture is how are all the different elements in your music adding up, right? And a lot of times the texture is what we'd call like a middle ground thing, right? So if you think of what's in the foreground, often it's the melody. Whereas the texture would be everything else that's supporting it, right? This part is the texture. Now with two hands on a piano, you're very limited. Obviously, with an orchestra, you've got a lot of choice. But there's other types of I mean, just basic stuff on a piano. Right, that's got a different feel versus. Let's see. So those are two just drastically different textures, and the texture has a lot to do with the rhythms that you're using in the accompaniment, how forceful it is, right? So I could do. Kind of a very concertoistic type of texture, right? You got these. You know, whatever you want to do. Or you could go kind of another route. There's so many ways to really break it down, but that's what I say. Once you get the idea of the texture you want, it's not useful so much continuing to sketch out your texture ideas unless there's a major change in texture. Because texture is like, it's seductive, right? It's just, it's kind of like nice harmony. It's like, ooh, listen to this texture. How interesting, right? And I've spent the last 2 minutes going, right, coming up with textures that just feel really nice. But what you end up doing is this is ending there, and 30 minutes go by, and you've written 2 bars of texture, and you've noodled for 40 minutes. It's the problem of noodling. Once again, it comes back to bite you. So I would say, if your focus, and this is one of the principles that I set is maybe I didn't set it here. I need to this is a work in progress. I'm putting out my ideas and kind of working with my ideas. Focus on essential material, but really it's kind of asking yourself, what is the goal here? What is the point of my sketching session, right? And it could be that you want to come up with 5 textures, right? Set yourself a goal, set yourself a limitation. You won't stop until you get those 5 textures. So, and you're saying, I want the textures to be for piano, right? Right? Okay, there's one texture. And now instead of playing that for 20 minutes, I'm going to just write that down. I've got F and G, and then I've got A flat and C, and I write it like this. This pencil's starting to break. I wish you guys could see really clearly what I'm doing. But I'm just going to, and this is, I'd probably be a little bit cleaner about it. Let's see if you can see. Can't really see. It looks really ugly on your screen. But all I did was write, right? And I wrote it once. And that's it. Done. Texture done. Right? Now I'm going to come up with another texture, right? So let's see. Let's see. So there's texture number 2. Am I going to keep this texture? I have no idea. But I'm going to write it down. Right, so I've got F down here, kind of deep, and then I've just got C, B flat, A, G. So I'm just gonna write that down: C, B flat, A flat, G. I'm gonna put a key signature here: B flat, E flat, A flat, D flat. Yes, I think of it like that when I'm writing key signatures because these things are just hard to remember. Okay, texture 2 done. Right, so we've done that. I've written it out. Boom, there it is. It's in red. You can see. That's all I need to remember that. Now I can come back to that later, or I can ignore it, right? Then let's see. Texture number 3. Ooh, that was a mistake, but I liked it.
Right. I wrote it once.
Getting that 7th in there. What happens to the sketches that don't go anywhere? Well, they don't go anywhere. I mean, a lot of times, I've got sketches going back to my teenage years that I've never touched, never thought about again. However, that's not to say that they weren't used by my subconscious. And I'm trying to, I don't want to make the subconscious out to this magical thing that does all the work for you. You have to put in the work. But there is something that goes on there. A lot of the deep thinking happens when you're sleeping. You know, it's why it's famous for people to get ideas in the shower. It's because when you relax and you give the ideas time to breathe in your brain, that's when the magic happens. Yeah, I keep all my sketches. I mean, I've got these books, right? And I don't tear out sheets. I try to keep them in there, and I try to generally label what the book was, what I was thinking, or what I was using the book for at the time. And if I'm doing things like these experiments, I'm dating them, right? You know, it's not so much just for musicologists and posterity, you know, people looking back at what you've done 50 years from now because you're such an amazing composer. I think it's just useful to write your thoughts, just like a journal, right? So I wrote here thoughts, worked really well, got into it. And, the experiment was don't start with the beginning, start with the ending, right? So I wrote it worked really well. I got into it, started physically conducting. Oh, this was interesting. So while I was doing it, I was alone in the house, which helps, you know. But I'm sitting here playing, you know, right? And I'm doing stuff with my hands, and you know, there's this video on it was like a TED talk where the guy talks about one cheek playing, you know, and he's playing Chopin. Let's see, how's this? And he when he plays off one cheek, he says the music becomes better. so it's a stupid thing, but there's something. It's physical, right? We're getting into this physically with your body. You're kind of moving around, and you know, don't worry about what everyone else thinks, because we're all crazy anyway. Everybody's kind of crazy a little bit. So if you got to stand up and you're like, you know, you're really getting into it, just go with it. Just go with it. But then, this is critical, stop and write it down. I'm going to harp on this for everybody. Everybody, stop what you're doing and write it down. After about, you get like a freebie, like 5 to 8 seconds where you can really like, you know, like really go with it. And then you just stop and you write it down, and then you continue. You get back into it, because what happens is you let 30 seconds go by of really like, this is just magical. And then 30 seconds go by, you're like, what did I just do? I have no idea. And then you get back to, I can't write music. And the reality is you can. You're just not stopping at the right moments to write it down. So we can continue making textures. I don't know if you guys want to do this, or if anybody else has other questions. So feel free to talk too if somebody's got a question here. You can unmute yourself. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, I can hear you. Can you? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let me ask you, how many times have you taken those singing sessions and transcribed it? Okay. Good. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Well, and there's always going to be moments like that. You know, I would say we probably should all recommend to each other. We should go on Amazon and buy a little sketchbook that fits in your pocket and a little pen or pencil.
Hello.
Right? So that's not a problem.
Hello, John. Can you hear me?
Most of the time, because I work from home now, so I'm
Hello?
usually around something where I can write it down.
Yes, writing down music is a bit of a problem sometimes because you don't always have your pen and paper with you.
You know, on video,
So
audio,
what I started doing is if
hard to
a
go
melody
back
comes
to
to
a
my
lot of
head,
that
something
stuff
I
and
like,
find really where the good
I
idea was. And I've got
sort of,
you know,
I won't
30,
say take
40
a selfie,
voice
but I will
notes.
switch on the
I just
video
never
on my
re-listened to
mobile
it.
phone, on my
It
cell
didn't
phone,
really work for me.
and I'll
But
sing
it
it.
does work for some people, I
I'll
realize
sing
that.
it.
And I don't want to restrict anybody from doing that. I just say, take the next step, though, and get it on paper as soon as you possibly can.
Quite a few times. I would say at least 3 or 4 times. Nothing has happened with it yet, but I still now I have record of what I've what you know that right moment I had a moment of time, because I don't know what I'm going to do with that, but sometimes something comes to you and you like it.
Yeah, so I would say it's hard to give a generality about how the texture affects how the texture relates to formal functions, right? So something like an exposition. To say that expositions are normally this kind of texture, I don't think we're ever going to be able to really say that. Um, there is something to say for the what's the purpose of the section, right? And that can lead you in a certain direction, right? So the ending of your piece, if you want it to be a big grand ending, right, you're going to have bigger
John, I have a
textures. You're going to
question
have more instruments playing
in regard to
versus the
texture.
opening, right?
If you
You
can
may
talk
want
about the
clarity
different
more.
structural
So a lot of it
functions of
is what's
music,
your compositional goal for the section.
the
You've got,
exposition into
a transition,
contrasting
let's say,
themes, subordinate
and
themes,
the
any
transition is
transitions,
leading
and
to
how
a more active
and how you treat those different texturally. Because, for
subordinate theme, right?
example, when
Then
you go into the
that's going to
contrasting
inform
theme,
how you
there'll be
deliver.
increasing
I would
harmonic,
say a
rhythmic
transition is probably going to
texture.
be a buildup of texture,
I'd be interested in
right?
hearing you talk about
And this
that.
is what I'm reading this dissertation right now on orchestral gestures. And there's basically, they've identified 4 core orchestral gestures. It's the sudden decrease, sudden increase, and the gradual decrease and gradual increase. And it's a good way of thinking about your orchestration. What's going on? Is there a gradual increase? Is it stagnant? I think stagnant could probably be in there too, because you may want the feeling of stagnation in a section and then a sudden increase. Um, and so I would say transition would be an easy one to pick. You're going to have some kind of gradual change within the transition often, right? Not 100% of the time. And you can never say this is a rule, but I would say expectation wise, you think about if the transition is transitioning to a more active, you compare that to this, right? Very different feel in the piano texture, right? If we were going to translate that to the orchestra, though, I would say that you've got this big. I can't. Let's see. Hope you're doing okay there. Your coughing's kind of loud. So we've had a very light. See, I can't. For some reason, I find it hard to start things in the middle. But either way, we've had very light texture up to that point, and it's going to start building up. You've got. If you wouldn't mind muting yourself while you're coughing. Oh no, that's perfectly fine. Maybe you should get that checked out. And it becomes this much bigger growing texture as we go into this more active. Now on the piano, there's not a million notes going on, but I would say overall the texture feels heavier and more active, right? So that's going to inform how you're adding orchestral texture later on, or whatever element you're coming up with. And the same as recapitulations, right? He may be playing the same thing, but there's more force in it. It's louder. So I would say it's hard to generalize, but look at all the elements of your music and what's the overall message that you want. More power, less power, more nuance, less nuance. 2D versus solos, all these things. It's hard to generalize. I don't know if that I didn't steer you too much in there.
I'm sorry. I'm
Just
sorry.
think about what's the purpose of the
I didn't.
section.
There I go.
Exposition. You're exposing things. You want clarity, maybe. Development section. Sturm und Drang, turmoil, right? Textures are going to get more complex, louder, softer, big changes, big drastic, changes in texture up and down. Whereas retransitions or transitions, these are going to be sections where you've got the more gradual changes. right now, that's all I can really say. I mean, I think it would take some kind of corpus study on specific composers to say, oh, Mahler likes to do this in these kinds of sections. Mahler likes to do that in these kind of sections. But it's so varied, and orchestration has been so poorly, theoretically treated that it's just so hard to say how, a rule of thumb for any one specific thing. So let's see. Tomas is asking if he could send a composition. Yeah, if you want to email it to me, preferably a Sibelius file or music XML if you've got it. We can take a look at it right now. While we're waiting, more questions. Got a little bit of time here. No? Let's see if I oh yeah. Okay. Okay, yeah. So I guess it can be a little bit confusing, but prolongation is you're prolonging really the kind of underlying tonic for the moment, right? So, that's kind of how we base it, right? So, a basic idea generally has a tonic prolongation progression, right? And the concept is that you're coming back to the original harmony at some point. Now, often that could also mean going to the other tonic, so the submedian.
I have a question.
Or it could be coming back to actual
I have
tonic.
a question
But if we just do a
about
simple one.
prolongation. I'm trying to figure out
Right,
when
so we just
when we talk
prolonged
about
C major
prolongation
right
of the harmony.
We could prolong it in another way.
I do understand it with the tonic, but can you
I
do
just
it
prolonged
with
it with a 4 chord instead of a 5 chord.
with other, or what's the difference between prolongation of a
Very Lord of
harmony
the Ringsy
and
there.
the
That's
functional
But
of the
we can
chord
also
progression?
prolong other areas of the harmony.
I'm not,
and a lot
not
of it is
quite
how you're thinking about your
understanding
harmony.
that.
So you can prolong and tonicize a different chord. Right, so here we go. We're going to... And now we're going to move to the 4 area. So within the same little theme or same progression, we've prolonged tonic and we've prolonged subdominant. You could do it, however you want to do it. It's just basically making your way back to where you started in some way. You can prolong, and it's harmonically speaking, inversions don't matter. So we just prolonged tonic there, but we've changed the inversion. We just prolonged 4. So this is not a prolongation progression. Because we just continued on and we kept going until we went back to C. So now you could say that the whole thing was one long prolongation progression, which is fair enough. The big progression ended up back at C. But I think it helps more on the small scale than it does on the big scale, because you don't necessarily want to say that you're just going to prolong C for 20 measures, right? That's not very useful for you in the moment. It's more like, okay, I want to do a basic idea where I prolong C, and then I'm going to move on to some other harmony, and kind of think of it like that. Then you can go move on from there. You don't have to stick with it. So, and when I went to E, A, D, it's kind of a sequential progression, right? Yeah. Yeah, by neighboring chords. Okay. So let's see. Okay, Tomas sent the piece. So let's take a look at it real quick. Oh, it's an MP3, so hopefully. Oh, whoa. Could you guys hear that? Is that too loud? Let's see. Okay, I'm going to play this.
Yeah, but I can take a predominant chord and prolong it by was it neighboring chords? Yeah. So okay. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, I think so. Tomas, I think you've got really good production skills and it's really high quality. I would say you're falling into a little bit of the trap that Nestor was falling into, and it's that I think you didn't know where you wanted to go. I think you think that you wanted to create something. I don't know if but you wanted to create something. But I think you fell into the trap of throw down drums, throw down bass, throw down some guitar, you got some chords, no strings, you got some stuff going on, and you didn't figure out at that point where the piece is going. And so setting some containers, saying I'm going to stick to song or I'm going to try to stick to a more classical style of music. Like something like sonata form could maybe work really well in an instance like that. Because it's very digestible. We've all heard sonata form so many times that it's understandable even for the general public. You don't need to be trained in music to just kind of get where it's going. But I would say a focus on melody, because classical music has melody, and I think that's missing badly from here. Is there's no melody to grab onto. There's texture. There's supporting melodic things. You may have the guitar, dun 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 dun, or something like that going on, and where it may be a single line and maybe melodic, it's not the primary element. You're not focusing on that. And that's why I don't just call it the melody. I call it the primary element. Is because where is your focus going? Sometimes the focus is texture. Sometimes the focus is interesting harmonies. But more often than not, it's one thing to grab onto. It's a kind of infectious melody. So I would say that's a big thing is you've got your textures. You've sketched a lot of your ideas out. But now don't be married to where that's going. Feel free to get to a pad of paper and just write what you know how to write. It could be notes, could be chord progressions, but get away from the computer, which is so tempting because it does allow you to pile on really cool textures. I mean, you've got unlimited synthesizers, unlimited, sampled instruments. The computer can play anything, and it's technically always going to be 100% accurate. It may not be right, but it's accurate. And that's just too much temptation for one person to handle. So I would say take the time now to ask yourself what's the point of the piece, what kind of emotions you want people to feel at what points, where your climax is going to be, where the low points are going to be, where the breather is going to be for people. What to be like, okay, you have a climax. You don't necessarily want to have everything feel like a big climax or else it's going to get tiresome. Take the time to say, where am I going to allow the people to just unwind their ears for a second and get back into it? You listen to Mahler's First Symphony, which I still love, even though it's his first symphony. It's not his ninth, and he's still got a lot of growth to do as a composer. But you find these moments, where it's that's all that's really going on. And he's giving you a moment to just relax, because maybe before it, it's, like that kind of stuff. Big moments in the orchestra are going on that are all leading to these huge cadences and big buildups, right? But you can't do that all. You can't have constant pressure, musical pressure on the people listening. You got to be able to hold it back. So that's my take on it. I think you've got something good here to start with, but you've got to now figure out where are you going with it. And the best way to do that still, I think, pen and paper, just one single line, maybe some chord symbols on it. Just figure out, even just map it out structurally. Say this is the first section, and this first section is supposed to be intense. Then this next section is supposed to be a breather. Then this next section is a build-up to the last section, which is just really intense. And it makes people feel like they've finally released everything, and they're like, finally the big cadence that I've been waiting for. So that's my thoughts on it. I don't know if your mic's working or if you just want to type your thoughts. But I think I hear somebody. I don't know who it is. Okay, maybe not. So I can see Henry asks, does anybody here audiate to compose sketch? I'm trying to learn by solfege and ear training, but it seems like it's going to take a long time until I fully audiate things. It's one of those skills that it will just take a lot of time. Audiation is what I found interesting is the studies on audiation. Oh, sorry. Apparently, I'm not presenting to everybody here. Hold on. Let me see. Let's see. The studies that I've seen on audiation is often they look at MRIs and the throat is moving as if the person's singing, right? So it kind of gives you a big indication there that if you practice singing things and practice, have a piano for reference, right? But you want to practice singing the right rhythms and the right notes as much as possible without that aid. So if I look at my sketch here, ba 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 da dun dum, ba da 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 da. Right? I kind of mess up the notes as I jump because it's a big jump. But I have the ability to sing, and I apologize, my singing's not the best. I don't have the best voice. But it's something I've done since I was a kid, and I didn't realize that I was really doing it that much. But hold on, let me see if I can still pull something. Let's see, Sunny. I used to sing a lot of jazz solos. Let's see, Joshua Redman. That's what I look for. I'm gonna let you in on a little private life of John Branningham here. I'm gonna sing a little jazz solo for you, along with the recording, so that you can see how I taught myself to audiate a little bit. If I can find the album here. Hold on, give me a second. Here we go. So I love Joshua Redman, one of my favorite sax players. Right? It's so stupid. I'm sorry I'm doing this for everybody. But these are natural things that we do as composers that don't, if you're sitting in the car and you're singing along, you're developing yourself. But try to pick things that are a little bit more difficult, as you go along. I can do this the whole, let's see. Do-do-do. Do-do. Do-do. Right? Okay, that's the end. I'm not gonna do it anymore. You get the point. I think there's real benefit into doing that. It's not just scat singing for the purpose of scat singing. It's just singing along because I wanted to do that. It's challenging, but if I want to sit down and try to now audiate a little bit, I'm just that little bit much better. And this is not the only thing I can sing along. I can sing along to hundreds and hundreds of jazz solos because I just listen to them so much. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean I can play it on sax or trumpet or anything. There's another layer of skill there that you have to build. Yeah, that's Joshua Redmond. Hide and Seek is the song from the album Freedom in the Group. Really great album. All his albums are really great. And he put out a new one where it's him and Brad Mildeau, one of my favorite pianists, just playing together. Highly recommend it. Check it out. Pick some pieces that you like and start singing along. You know. So yeah, that's my favorite Okay, I think we're kind of getting to the end here. It's been about 2 hours, and I've got to drywall my bathroom. My wife and I, we got the itch the other day, and we're like, let's just tear out our old nasty, smelly cabinet and put in a new sink and everything. So we basically don't have a bathroom right now. So I've got to finish it up today, or else we're gonna go like another week without. We've got an extra bathroom that's just a half bath, so we can still wash our hands and brush our teeth, thankfully. But yeah, if there's any other questions that I can answer real quickly, get to it. Otherwise, I'll be hopefully seeing everybody next week. I've got everybody, a lot of people filled out the little form to figure out a good time for the symposium. So I'm trying to comb through that. I've got to convert now all the time so that they're in the same time zone so I can see the day and the time. So it's a little bit tricky. Once I get through that, though, I just got to write whatever the little formula is. Hopefully I'll be able to pick another day or another time and day that works out for the most people, or maybe, you know, every other week we switch times. We have one on this day and one on this day at this time to try to get everybody, because there's people all over the world. So, but so if you haven't done that, you know, add your 2 cents. I think I sent it out in the previous week's email. But email account asks if I start out my sketching with a form in mind. Sometimes I do. That is a constraint that I do give myself. Often I'll pick a simple form, something like small ternary form, because it feels very rounded, right? But it could be, you know, an 8-measure theme or a, you know, a compound theme or something. Try to sketch out a sonata. I should try this just one day, just write an entire piece in sonata form in one day. I haven't actually sat down to try that yet. I think that would be an interesting thing. That's pretty long, though. I mean, you're talking 4 or 5 minutes of music. That can take a while to get through. So picking a longer form like that can be tricky. I say setting the goal smaller to a smaller formal section is more useful for sketching. Because if you try to lock yourself into something and you're not feeling it, then you just get frustrated and say, like, I don't know how to compose. Well, really, you're locking yourself in the wrong way. You know, I think the one thing that you have to commit to is that you're going to write music, you know, to a certain point. Like, I'm going to write, you know, three line or three staves of music, whether it's single line, piano, or full orchestra, you know, whatever you feel like you can handle. You pick the right kinds of limitations. You pick the wrong limit and you'll start to get frustrated. So yeah. Okay, well, I think that does it for me. My voice is starting to get a little bit hoarse here. I've been recording this one, so everybody will be able to rewatch it. And I don't know, I probably shouldn't post it, but for the rest of time, I'm going to be there singing to Joshua Redmond. So maybe that's how we end this thing. It gets even worse when I got to do the piano. Hold on. I can't hit those high notes. He hits the high notes. Okay. So I think this is a fun one. It was fun for me. It was like everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, we need to stop." So, yeah. So yeah. So that's your homework then. I think everybody needs to do this a little bit. One, sit down, have a legit sketching session. Try to follow some of these principles I laid out. Check out the article. And in another article, I'm going to try to lay out very specific ideas for sketching by hand. And actually, this has been useful for me too. You know, coming up with terms like the temptation of texture. It's alliteration, so it'll stick in your mind. But it's so true in having a technique like, I'm going to sketch 5 textures and I'm going to leave texture alone after that. That's a good way to go about this. That's a perfect kind of list. So really think about this. I do want input from everybody. I would love to see experiments just like I'm doing. Set yourself a goal. Say, my experiment today is that I'm not going to write any harmony. I'm not going to write any bar lines. I'm just going to write notes with rhythm, and I'm going to make a lot of forward progress, right? Or it could be as simple as I'm going to write rhythms, and I'm going to sketch out a general idea of where the melody's going, right? That could be really cool. It may not work at all. We don't know until you try it out, and it may work for you. It may not work for me. Or vice versa, or it may be the most incredible technique we've all seen ever in our whole lives, and pack it up, we're all going to be geniuses. Who knows, until we figure it out. So, okay, well, that pretty much does it for me. This will probably, these are always like, you know, a gigabyte or 2 gigabyte file, so they take about all day to get it up on YouTube uploading. But check for this, it'll be on the symposium page later on. So, until next time, I'll see everybody later.